Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many
cost on them?
$50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Today is Monday, March 23rd, 2026. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is good friend of the pod, Charlie Boehm. Aaron is in Minnesota, or was coming back, I suppose, from Minnesota, where he was partying with all the Sounder at Heart people. But anyway, Charlie, how's it going?
I'm great. It's great to be here. Hopefully, no ICE airport shenanigans or long TSA lines.
Yeah, geez. I know it's become quite a thing traveling these days. But I thought it would be fun to, rather than break down this exhilarating 0-0 tie that the Sounders just had with Minnesota United, and we can talk a little bit about that, I suppose, but we don't need to do a whole show dedicated to probably the least interesting game of the Sounders season. What I thought might be more interesting so far. Yeah. Good note. Good note. Very good note. But as we go into this international break, Sounders don't play for a couple weeks. And I wanted to kind of get your sense of, last year we were doing this thing that we called How the West Will Be Won. We haven't done that yet this year, but I thought this would be a good time to sort of do that again. And what I wanted to do is talk to you about your sort of tiering of the Western Conference and where you see teams shaking out and where the Sounders are. Maybe get your assessment of Champions Cup, Champions League. I don't know. One of these days, it'll feel natural to call it something, but I don't know. Concacaf Champions, I know it seems like that should be it, but it doesn't. It is a mouthful,
quite, I recognize.
It doesn't come naturally to me yet. Yeah, exactly. CCC exactly. CCL felt so.
It's very CONCACAF to have a litany of clumsy names for its feature showcase product at the club level.
Exactly.
The brand is just so strong.
One of these days, in 50 years, we'll be looking back on this and go, oh, remember when CONCACAF was struggling for brand awareness? And then they'll say, what is CONCACAF? What are you talking about? But anyway, let's start with the Sounders though. Did you happen to consume any of that match?
I watched long stretches of that match, and my eyes didn't catch a blaze. So I guess I dodged a bullet there. But I think you had the resistible object meeting the movable force. Or whatever it is there, because Minnesota just didn't want to get shelled for 6 again the second week.
They sure did not.
And Seattle had the customary CCC hangover with good reason, where even their home leg was an away leg. So I think there was a real sense of unfussy satisfaction with a scoreless draw far from home on a what I think was a characteristically chilly Minnesota afternoon. James Rodriguez ends up being he's just going to be the sideshow, kind of the story for the subplot maybe for Minnesota United for the foreseeable future, and I'm very, very curious to see how that develops. He made his home debut. I think he's looked lively in both of his appearances so far, but we just don't have much of a sense of has he earned the coach's trust? Is he really match fit? Does he fit into anything tactically yet? So given that's sort of a wild card for a team in Seattle's position to have to deal with, I think you just walk away from that one feeling fine. You know, there's one team in my lifetime that I've seen do anything more than tread water in the league, and by extension the Shield race, while making a deep run in CCC, and that was Vancouver last year, right? And that's essentially unprecedented. It's why Jesper Sorensen is, to me, the most underrated coach still, even after all the love he's gotten, because they managed to do that. But that is just an extremely black swan event. So I think Brian Schmetzer and company just have to take that one and move on to the next and get to the international break, which they have without any more injury setbacks.
Yeah, and even mighty Vancouver fell at home to San Jose, who, hey, that's the Sounders just beat San Jose. So it's funny, you look back at the Sounders schedule and there's some really good results. There are 1 losses to RSL, who at the time it felt kind of a disappointment, but at this point, RSL, I mean, we'll get into this, but RSL looks like they are a real team right now and only getting stronger potentially.
RSL are legit to me, and they proved it again, I would say, with what they did yesterday against San Diego. Now, granted, everybody who's playing a CCC team on short rest right now sees it as an opportunity to some extent, at least at the opening whistle, depending on match events. And so I give San Diego a little bit of credit there, but RSL just keep doing it. I mean, I think they're going to be a problem throughout the season. Right now, they're tied with the Sounders for 5th in the West. And so if we're talking about tiers, like I don't know. I would like for my top tier to have less than half a dozen teams in it, but I don't know how to do that easily, because both those teams to me look like they're in it to win it, and they are well crafted, have a strong sense of self, and are showing it thus far on the pitch.
Well, let's that rather than beat around the bush, let's just get into it, and we may as well start at the top. So if you're gonna assess the sort of apex contenders, is that right? Apex contenders in the West, who do you have in that group in no particular order necessarily?
Well, I think in the early weeks of the season, we were talking about sort of 3 in terms of LAFC, Vancouver, and San Diego, and that was a combination of what they did last season, and then how they were managing to extend the best elements of last season. Those 3 teams that were consistent, that were good both in the regular season and clearly, were also a problem in the knockout environment of the playoffs, and had momentum down the stretch last season and had continued it into the new year. But by the same token, I think any of these teams we're going to talk about, there's no one you would say are quite even at Miami level in terms of, and even, this is MLS, so even Miami has flaws, right? But all these teams have some nagging doubt that at least I look at and have to harbor, because so LAFC are, they're alone in first place. They're one of only 2 teams that have yet to lose. Make sure I got that right in the league. 3 teams. So only 3 undefeated teams: San Diego, LAFC, and Nashville.
Nashville, kind of the surprise of the group a little bit.
Yeah, Western Conference alumni, Nashville, of course, tearing up the East. But then, and then they're the only team left that hasn't allowed a goal in league play, which is quite impressive. All those words I just said.
LAFC is the only team.
LAFC is, that's right. Sorry.
Right.
And LAFC has yet to concede. And after all that I've just said, you would think we'd be talking about them as a little bit more of a colossus. But there's already questions. So Mark Dos Santos, who was a logical successor to Steve Trundolo, they've promoted the assistant from within. And in doing so, they've endorsed their culture and what they've built and what they established already. but we have some of his lower division time that we could look at, but more pertinently his ill-fated stint in charge of the Whitecaps a couple of years back. And there were some questions to be that, built into that. And I think we have questions now. And I think Matt Doyle has talked about this. I've written about this a little bit. He's not considering that a very deep, well-crafted roster that had prepared for him by John Thornton. Dos Santos is not really doing the levels of rotation that I would have expected from a team with their reserves of talent. And I think you see the depth and the quality and depth with the role players keep stepping up, right? David Martinez has produced a couple of clutch goals. They've gotten game winners and game-changing goals from midfielders like Mark Delgado and Matthew Choinière and Steven Eustachio. But the big guns, the first two names we talked about with LAFC are Son Heung-min and Denis Bouanga, and they've both played a lot. Now Dos Santos has alluded to, in general, in terms of I was on some of his media availabilities earlier on the CCC run, and he was talking about how in the context specifically of going to Honduras for their first match to play Real España in CCC, and how it wasn't just that guys like Hugo Lloris and Sonny were going to be able to handle an away day in Honduras. It was that they wanted to be on the field, and he would have a problem with his stars if he wasn't playing them regularly. So I'm sure I know he, like so many coaches, want to have a trusted rotation, a core group of 12 to 15 players that they can trust that create a rhythm on the pitch together. But there's already some legginess showing. Son has yet to score in league play. They're already getting into sort of a grinded out mode, which again, considering the wealth of talent he has at his disposal, I think that's a little bit of a red flag. And so I have reservations despite the strong resume that LAFC has produced thus far. And I think you could say something somewhat comparable about Vancouver, and the Sounders are the ones who inflicted it, right? The biggest questions come from that leg one Seattle win at BC Place, where a previously undefeated, unblemished, I think, team or almost unblemished team and Vancouver had just cratered, right? They just came apart over 90 minutes against a clever, well-organized, well-prepared opponent. And so that that nags at me a little bit that they're, I'm not sure that they have the depth that LAFC does. I think there's just so much happening in the background in Vancouver with the stadium drama, the knock-on effects, which Seattle and others have also dealt with in terms of what being a World Cup venue does to your club calendar and the disruptions there. And then, of course, the specter of relocation is still there. It doesn't seem imminent, but it's certainly floating around in the background. And again, this is MLS, right? So what the Whitecaps did last season was so surprising, so impressive, so unprecedented in terms of being so good across so many competitions. This is not a league where that type of performance is regularly repeated, much less year over year. So I guess that would be my sort of doubt about Vancouver. And then along the same lines to talk about that first trio, San Diego, I think they were valiant. They were super impressive in their bravery and their commitment in their series against Toluca. That first leg 3-2 win in San Diego was one of the most remarkable games I've ever watched, CONCACAF or otherwise. But it all came crashing down last week at 8,000 plus feet in Toluca. And I think we saw, and again, it's unfair to judge them against the class team in Mexico right now. Liga MX is back-to-back defending champions. But some concerns that had kind of been brewing about San Diego's depth or lack thereof, their fidelity to the play out of the back, possession-heavy model at all costs, and the fact that they're effectively playing with, in MLS terms, they're playing with one or two hands tied behind their back because they've exiled their most talented player, Chucky Lozano. They made clear that he's not in their plans, despite him being by far their highest paid player, their best recognized player, and one of their DPs. And so they've just got a sunk cost right now with one of the DP slots, and they were only using two DP slots to begin with because they've been on the 2-4 roster construction model. So I said on another pod recently that I have this, maybe there's a sneaking suspicion or guesstimate that San Diego maybe are further ahead of where they thought they'd be at this point in their cycle of building up in expansion life. And maybe they've decided to be faithful to the master plan rather than to shift things around. But this is a team that suddenly finds itself in a championship contention window.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're doing everything they could be doing to maximize that. And I think that could become a concern sooner or later.
Well, I just talk about San Diego a little bit. I watched most of that game against RSL yesterday, and it struck me that for large portions of that match, it seemed like they were just almost toying with RSL and ready to pull. Like they were just like one play away from putting the game away, and then they end up giving up a late goal. And I mean, there was a scenario where they get 0 out of that game, and it does kind of remind me of that what happened against them with Toluca, where for as impressive as that first leg was, and they were up 3-1. They were in a situation where 3-1 is a very, you can manage that lead, especially if you have all your personnel. And then their young center back, who is probably one of the top young talents in the league, makes a frankly unconscionable decision to commit a handball offense on a ball that's going in the net anyway. And so they give up this goal, which you were going to give up the goal anyway, but you certainly didn't have to play the second leg without one of your best defenders. And it just seems like those are the little moments where it's like, that's the difference between a championship team and a team that's just a lot of fun to watch and really exciting. And, the RSL game was in the same way that, they were a lot of fun to watch. They were pinging the ball around, and then all of a sudden RSL equalizes through a kind of like grindy play, and they're walking away with 1 point. And that was kind of how last year, like they can play with anyone, but they can also, give it away just as easily.
Yeah, they let RSL hang around and were punished for it. And they're the small margins. I mean, I think, or at least a big chunk of the listeners probably can remember specific details of Seattle's 2022 CCL run, right? And so many small margin moments, high leverage, small margin, where something had to go right and it did, or disaster was averted, right? And Christian Roldan made so many plays in that championship run, and there's all these little moments where the tiny little thing maybe is what makes the difference in beating an elite opponent. And 3-1 to 3-2 without your best defender, and you saw like the loss of Manudua had this cascading effect everywhere across their team that made me that was like my real red alert. Like, okay, wow, the depth is a real problem here. Like, I love that they're digging up kids from other teams' MLS Next Pro squads and giving them contracts and rolling them out in the starting lineup on opening night, which is what they did against Pumas. It's just sort of like, oh, hell yeah, that's great. The Quakes don't even know that they've got talent on their second team, and San Diego is picking it up and plugging it right in, right? So love that. But at some point there's maybe a little bit, and I've written glowing profile or two about San Diego and Tyler Heaps and those involved. But at some point, I think that if it hasn't already happened, there'll be a little bit of self-reflection that at the risk of delving into the problematic sport of bullfighting. You hear that, there's a concept of the matador, right? And in Spanish and Mexican and other soccer cultures, the term sometimes gets tossed around in the context of the matador is the assassin, right? That's the final blow. That's the killer in the box. When I look at San Diego FC, really there's only one, right? It's Anders Dreyer. He is the difference maker. He is the elite player that they have, and especially in the final third. He produces these incredible goals, right? And he can dish the ball as well and make the final pass too. But if he gets marked out of the game or isn't quite on it, or things just aren't clicking, who then steps up for them? And I think they would have hoped that Marcus Ingvartsen would be that guy. Maybe someone like Alex Mighton, but there just hasn't been the same level. So when you drop from, and great teams have to get results with their second or third or even fourth option in a given position or a given role, right? And I don't think San Diego have shown us that they can do that, because again, the DPs, it's possible to succeed in MLS, maybe even in CCC, without your premium roster slot players performing at a high level and setting the tone and producing. but it's very, very difficult, and they're not even using all those slots at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and not to take anything away from Anders Dreyer, who is great, like continuing to a special player who might be one of the. I mean, if you look at the cost per production, might be the best DP acquisition in league history. I don't even know if that is a
he's the non-Messi MVP, I would say, for last year, and so far maybe even this year too.
Yeah, but he's just a guy. He's one player, and there were moments like, and then I don't know. I look at him, and he when he chips the goalie on the, I mean, it wasn't like a huge chip, but when he scored that goal, I was like, man, he just makes that look so easy. Wouldn't it be great to have a player like that? And it felt like San Diego was just going to run away with that game at that point. But anyone else? So okay, you've listed these three teams. You've also shown that they have some flaws. Or is there anyone else in your sort of apex tier of teams?
I mean, I can't. I mean, it's a little surreal for me to say these words, but after what they did to Vancouver on Saturday, was it right? The San Jose Earthquakes have entered this chat. I mean, and that's like.
I mean, you're right.
Those of us who've been watching the Western Conference for a while know how bizarre that might sound to someone just a few months back, right? But year 2 under Bruce Arena, they've made big strides. Everything that he's been saying in public, everything that he told me when we did a sit down in the Coachella area during preseason is coming to pass. He's been saying they're a much better defensive team this year. Their starting points are much more advanced than last year. Many others who have a data centered point of view on the game will discuss how much behind they were results wise, their underlying numbers last season. Right, they were they lost games they shouldn't have. They drew games they should have won, and it's like it's all sort of coming together now. And the idea of addition by subtraction, which of course we hear that's a kind of a sports cliche at this point, but it appears to be valid in the case of Joseph Martinez and Chicho Arango leaving.
And I want to, before you move on, I want to focus on that point though, because I think a lot of us observing this team looked at, okay, they lost, I think I just read this today, 44 goal contributions between those two and Christian Espinoza. You could argue those were their 3 best defensive players. I don't think anyone's going to argue that they wouldn't be better off of Espinoza have you heard the story that apparently the deadline they missed was because his option needed to be picked up at mid-season and they just didn't know.
Well.
Yeah, they just didn't know.
Someone dropped the ball, and you can, speaking of addition by subtraction, you can go back and look at the timing of certain front office staff and their departure to do a little bit of, yes, admittedly circumstantial, but from what I understand, accurate speculation about who at least was assigned responsibility within the organization for all that. So Bruce, it has to be pointed out, Bruce Arena is both GM or I think he may be director of soccer or something, but he is essentially the CSO.
He's the
and
CSO
the coach, which is only a few of those are left in MLS. Greg Berhalter is another one in Chicago. It's a tough job, but I think you see there why he's still in a position to demand that level of authority and control over things. And sure enough, I mean, another remarkable thing about these Quakes, they are so Timo Werner, their showpiece guy, their difference maker, essentially wasn't around for any of preseason. They were giving him, there's the usual paperwork stuff. They're also giving him extra time because he and his wife just had a baby last month, their first child. And so he's playing catch up. And they're so good as a collective that he has the time and the luxury of working his way up rather than, sort of being a savior. And as Bruce had said to me in preseason with some pride, they're a domestic heavy team. This is a team that's got a bunch of Americans and Canadians on it, a bunch of what we would maybe call lunch pail guys who are not necessarily perceived to be stars or elite players in the league, but are reaching a higher level or their highest level that we've seen from them thus far in the system and under Bruce Arena. So that's very impressive too. I mean, they're getting important minutes and contributions out of super draft guys and waivers guys. And this is all before we even get into a whole other topic, which is, they've been one of the more underperforming academies. If you look at market size and quality of talent pool in the youth level versus
I mean, you
what actually
could.
makes it to the first team.
I've said this, but as a Bay Area native, this doesn't surprise me. But you could probably make a legitimate MLS playoff contending team out of players who came out of the Earthquakes catchment area. Who you could even use players who never entered the Earthquakes developmental pipeline, and you could make a very good team out of these players. I mean, it's wild to think about these players that you come up and you're like, wait a minute, that guy grew up in San Ramon? What the hell? Like he never even, like just to use an example, like Sebastian Lletget grew up in Santa Clara, never touched the Earthquakes. I don't think developmental pipeline. This is obviously an older player, but there's countless examples of that. But anyway, they are, I think, a story that a lot of people are still sleeping on last year. To your point, they had a expected goal difference last year of 9.84, which put them 7th in the league, which was one spot behind the Sounders. And their actual, they underperformed their expected goal difference by 13 goals, which was the 4th worst in the league. And the teams worse than them were Atlanta, DCU, and Montreal, which sort of illustrates the degree to which they underperformed last year. Like none of those teams were even close to playoff contenders. And, did they make the playoffs? They did make the playoffs, right?
They were in it right to the end, but they did not.
Oh, they finished tied on points and they lost out to RSL, if I remember correctly. But yeah, and you look at who they replaced, we were talking about the addition by subtraction. The players that they replaced Arango and Martinez with are not expected to carry the same offensive load, but they are doing yeoman's work defensively. Like Preston Judd, who is a quietly efficient player, and Nico Sakaris, they're both doing the work that they're actually running. They're actually doing some of the defensive work that those two just were not either capable or willing to do. And all of a sudden, they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. They look much more like a classic Bruce Arena team and less like kind of the freewheeling club that they were. But it's kind of funny to remember that Bruce Arena took over a team that was one of the worst defensive teams in MLS, maybe the worst defensive team in MLS history. Just absolute disaster defensively. And I think understandably last year he focused on sort of fixing the offense. But I think you're right to put them in this tier, at least right now. I mean, their one loss is to the Sounders, and I think any reasonable person will say that they deserved more than they got out of that game.
And when you watch them play, they are, and I mean they were pretty dominant for long stretches against Seattle, right?
Yeah,
and just didn't get the killer touch. But this is whatever image in your mind you have of how Bruce's teams play, because he's had pragmatic teams that are sort
that's
of
true.
Not a joy to watch, but this team is fun. Like I would say they're on my list of sort of aesthetic teams that I gravitate towards just when I'm looking to watch a game as a neutral, because they're connecting passes, they get forward, they make decisions at speed, the interplay, the interchange is at a high level for it still being March. This team is balling. So again, I think, and you could raise questions about whether they have the horses to keep pace with the elite over the long term, and I'd be interested to see if they spend some money maybe in the summer, if they try and upgrade the squad. One of Bruce's real superpowers that it wasn't until, as the league evolved around him, he turned out to have this knack for, he can still connect with young guys, and almost everybody who ever played for Bruce just raves about him. They have like an authentic love and respect for him as a leader of humans. But he also seems to be able to speak owner, right? He speaks boomer.
Yes.
So his legacy at New England, whatever you want to say or not say about the contentious circumstances, shall we say, of his departure, the fundamental difference between the Revs before and after Bruce is that they are now considered an elite team in terms of their ambition, their investment. Their training facility is state of the art. They're trying to get a downtown stadium. They go out and pay for players, right? They have an elite tentpole in Carlos Gil. he's already getting some of the same stuff, and he's made a point of noting, ownership has supported us. They've upgraded the everything from the cafeteria to the training facilities to the playing surface of both the practice fields and the stadium, PayPal Park. They're still behind in terms of the infrastructure stuff that maybe Seattle and other teams kind of take for granted at this point, but he knows how to get commitment from ownership as well. And I think that's something to watch in the medium term here.
Yeah. I mean, that is probably his most remarkable thing, is that San Jose for a long time, forever, frankly, has been considered a team who cut corners and did everything they could to spend as little money as possible. And this, the fact that they were a place that could attract a Timo Werner was itself pretty remarkable. And,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you just reminded me. I wrote a feature for MLSsoccer.com leading into the Seattle Quakes match, and Bruce was very generous with his time. He and I chatted for almost an hour, 1v1, during preseason. He was aside from a few of the droll sarcastic quips that you expect from him, right? And it's true. I should be honored that he deigned to send some of those in my direction. But he was really great company, a great conversation. He said a couple things that stuck with me. He said about the Quakes specifically. He said, "This is a different challenge than anything I've had. When I came in, I saw an organization that is not prepared to win. It's not a priority, and I think we're making that better. I didn't come to San Jose just to lose soccer games. I think they've been pretty stagnant over a number of years and sometimes accept mediocrity. So you've got to try to inspire them. So you got to inspire them to try to achieve more. So in a way, maybe I can have some leadership value in that regard and try to motivate people to be as good as they can be in their positions. That's not only downstairs in the building, it's upstairs as well, from sales to marketing to how you run everything to facilities. All those things add up."
Yeah, I mean, that's I respect that. I'm just curious. So one of the things, I just listened to an interview that he did on Scuffed, where he, it's interesting because he goes between almost feeling offended at the question but also giving an honest, like, he doesn't suffer bullshit. That's like his trademark. Wouldn't you say that he just doesn't have time for your gotcha questions or whatever? Like, I'm not saying that. He'll so did you, just out of curiosity, when you went into that interview, did you feel like you had to prepare differently than you would interview for Brian Schmetzer, who frankly is going to humor every single question you have, even if he doesn't have a great answer?
I was prepared to get cooked, and try to be ready for that. He called me out, I think, one area where I had watched them play at Coachella Valley Invitational the day before. Mm-hmm. And that's a game. That's a tournament where there's often games overlapping, right? So there were two games going on at once, and then I was trying to connect with. I mean, the great thing about that tournament from a media perspective is there's all these teams that are there, and everyone's just sort of walking around, and the press pass gets you into the quote unquote VIP area where like CSOs are just shooting the breeze with one another, or watching games, or watching their team warm up, and so I was trying to catch up with all these different people. So I wasn't able to watch the full 90 minutes of his match, but there's a kid I called him a kid because there was someone who's new to me who scored a goal and looked quite good in the Quakes game. And I mentioned like, oh yeah, who's that kid that scored yesterday?
Timo Werner.
Timo Werner was still in Germany at this point. But sorry, I'm going to pull up the name because I want to make sure I don't mess up. But he was like, I call this guy who they promoted from the second team a kid, and he's like, oh, he's 25 years old. I mean, I don't know that's not a kid. The player's name is Nonso Ademagua, and he's definitely one to watch. He's a Nigerian guy who I think played at one of the local colleges, and he is 25 now, so I guess you could say he's a late bloomer, but strong, quick, powerful striker who, maybe that's one of the guys that they have waiting in the wings that will disprove my previously stated concerns about their depth. But Bruce goes, yeah, I'm prepared for you media guys to not know what you're talking about. So, so that was pretty. So that was all right. Par for the course. You know, I'm in this now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I just gotta. I don't know if I'm built. I don't know if I'm built for. I'm getting used to interviewing people like Brian, who, frankly, they want to engage. You know, they want you to want to talk to them, you know, and I get the sense with Bruce that it's he just doesn't think like that. You know, he doesn't. And I've come to appreciate it, and I'm sometimes I'm oftentimes fascinated to hear people talk to him because I like to see the different approaches. But like he does not strike me as someone who you should try to outsmart or to try to impress him with how much you know, because he will not be impressed. Like,
oh no, he's seen it all.
Like,
yeah,
like you got to come in there almost like senpai teach me, you know, but you're confident about it somehow. Like, you can't let him think you're there to get walked over. But I don't know.
I was super impressed, and he again the loyalty that he inspires is really striking, because like while we're sitting there, we're in the courtyard of their hotel, and they're getting ready. Like after he's done with me, this is first thing in the morning. It's like 8 a.m. and he's gonna have a staff meeting, and you see the guys like Dave Sarakin has been with him for decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he's gone. He left and worked with Robbie Keane for a while in Israel, and he came back. Shalry Joseph was with him in New England, and he's brought him over. There's multiple other guys, so many guys that he's worked with,
but not his son this time, right?
No. I mean, I gather that, you know, and the one thing I wish I'd gotten to talk to him about a little bit, but didn't get to was him being a soccer dad as well, because Kenny Arena is an experienced coach now in his own right, and is on staff at Cincy, I believe, now, and you know, the Bruce Arena coaching tree is enormous, right? And it now has sub trees underneath
right.
it. And so it's that in and of itself speaks volumes. I think he's been more careful. The sense I get is that Arena's gotten a lot more cautious after kind of the wreckage of everything in New England. But I think he knows too that part of the job in San Jose is to do media, even if it annoys him to some extent, because this is a club that's trying to get back to relevance locally, nationally, in every sense.
I can see
that. He can do a lot. And there's been some, they did a full hour's worth of like a press conference for Timo Werner, like when he was signed, but he hadn't arrived yet. And so he was beaming in on Zoom from Germany, and Bruce is on the call, and they took like almost an hour's worth of questions. It was really, I was really impressed. It was longer than your average media availability. And I could see that when he had unfiltered moments, he was maybe not loving the marathon press availability, but no doubt gets why, right? And what they need to try and connect with their market, because they're behind the curve there. But again, nothing fixes any of that stuff like all of that stuff like winning, and they are.
Yeah, I mean, as not to get too stuck on San Jose, but you know, as a Bay Area native, there is part of me that would like to see what it would look like if the Earthquakes went on, like could put together something like a sustained run, because you know, the only time they've been good really in the modern era of MLS was the Bash Brother era in, I guess, 2012, which was really like a season. Like there was really only one really good season, and
that was the only trophy they won, I think. Yeah, they won the year, right? And that was it.
Yeah, and they played at Santa Clara University at Buck Shaw Stadium, which was it's laughable to think that was considered an MLS stadium. I mean, even at the time, it was laughable, but it was not a welcoming environment it was not someplace that fans were dying to get to. Not that PayPal Park is great.
I haven't been to either one, and that's.
I mean, PayPal Park is a huge upgrade from Buck Shaw, but it's still like it lacks a lot of the amenities of most MLS stadium at this point. But all right, is there anyone else in this top tier for you, or is it kind of a 4-team race right now in your mind?
I would recognize that there's again, the whole concept of tiers is maybe it's too soon, or maybe it doesn't fully apply yet because we're struggling to reconcile what we know, what we thought we knew about teams from 2025 with what they are now. But again, we mentioned Seattle and Salt Lake being tied right now. I'm really liking what I see from both of those teams. I think, and here we are. We're now down to this 6, right? These are 5 and 6 in the current standings, and I think Salt Lake. So they sat me down with Xavier Gozo and Aiden Hezarkhani before during preseason. And it's sort of like, we're high on these guys. Essentially, was the
teenagers.
Message. You should meet these guys, and I knew Gozo had a few highlight reels, right? He scored an incredible golazo last year. That
he had a great youth national. He was like the standout player for the youth national team too, right?
Yes, despite he was on the last U20 World Cup team, one of the youngest guys on it, and scored goals and assists, and was very impressive. And that the first 5 weeks of the season have vindicated what RSL staff the direction they pointed me in. I mean, these are really talented kids, considering they're 18. I think Gozo just turned 19. He is way ahead of the curve physically, just like a freak athlete who's also super techie on the ball, wants to beat people. The skill set is already really impressive in terms of his toolkit as a teenager. And in general, it appears that what was described to me as a period of underinvestment in the youth pipeline that they've spent so much time and money building over a period of really the better part of a decade. I think with the whole Del Loy Hansen saga and the ownership shift, they were really running on a shoestring for a good year or two there, and kind of they're kind of in a purgatory a little bit. Now they feel like they've got it humming again, right? And they are one of the leading clubs in terms of recruiting beyond their market. They try to recruit throughout the West, Southwest in particular, but really the entire West. I mean, Hezarkhani is from Irvine, California, right? And they are as conscious as anyone that Galaxy and LAFC can only sort of tag so many of their youth players or players in the market. And there's still probably, we would say, hundreds, if not thousands of potential future pros beyond those lists. And so they recruit cleverly there. They were ahead of the curve in terms of scouting USL. That's where they got Diego Luna from. And
Rod
so
Rojas as well, that they turned into a transfer fee.
It's the natural rejoinder is that you still have to augment those elements of your roster with elite difference makers. But so far so good there. I mean, the new DP who's I'm checking the name because I don't want to stumble up on it, but Morgan Gila Vogie.
He man, I'll tell you. Yeah, he's one of those ones where I think a lot of people, myself included, looked at and said, what are we doing here, signing these sort of almost throwaway players from Ligue 1? And apparently he's good because he's looked great. I mean, even in that first game against the Sounders, he looked good, but he's looked every game he's looked impressive. And the Sounders you mentioned in there, and I think that's fair. That top 6 does feel like there's a big drop off after that top 6, but as far as the Sounders, what have you seen? What have you liked from the Sounders?
Well, we know that they're not spending, right? I mean, this is what's remarkable is there's an aura around Seattle that goes back to their early days in the league when they were instantly a trendsetter and a pace setter, and the spending model has shifted sort of 180 degrees from there, but the aura remains. And I think it's because you have a pretty smart coach who understands his team, his club, his city, his region quite well, and an underrated CSO and they've figured out how to maximize the resources they have and take advantage of undervalued assets and wasteful decisions elsewhere in the league. And they've built a really sturdy collective as a result. I mean, the injury situation is galling, right? I mean, you look at the number of players they've already lost, and we're just if we want to say 6 weeks in because they had to start early with CCC, or maybe it was 7 weeks. I don't know. I mean, that's a huge problem. And I know that the Sounders for a long time were sort of defying their circumstances with injuries because they were a team that had to travel a lot and were playing a lot on turf, and those factors weren't showing up in their injury history for many years. I don't know if it's coincidence or if there's something else that's led to that shifting a bit. But they're overcoming it. They're surmounting this, and that speaks so highly of the Defiance pipeline and the ability to identify the players that they need within the system, and either cultivating them or going and finding them somewhere else and finishing them and making them useful.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a secret to what the Sounders are doing in terms of their ability to sort of like have this conveyor belt of useful players, I think I'll just say. But I do think it's like almost common sense is that they make everyone believe that they're a potential contributor. And so when they get on the field, they're not playing out of their, like you see it in Antino Lopez when he shows, he gets that start against San Jose, and it's like, well, my job was to do this, and that was what I did, like it's just like there's this, they believe that they are going to contribute, and like there's a lot of really talented soccer players out there, and it's not that hard. It's the trick is not finding talented soccer players. The trick is like imbuing those soccer players with the right belief and sort of like tactical mindset. But that seems to be what the Sounders are doing right now. The Peter Kingston thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Kingston was one of the ones I was going to bring up next. I think it was I don't remember if it was leg 2 of the Vancouver series or the league game the weekend before, but they picked Rothrock to do the video, the stand-up interview post game. Mm-hmm. And he almost immediately said, he shouted out Kingston. I think it was Kingston and Lopez. He said that, I want to shout out the Defiance guys because I was one of them. I think that
was after the San Jose game, but yeah.
And it's so interesting that's a reflection of an internal culture in a locker room where it is widely mm-hmm. understood, both among young guys and veterans, the role that these new arrivals have to play, and what sustainability looks like for that collective. And it's not always the case. I have seen interviews, and I've interviewed veteran players on teams that are trying to be academy centered or youth centered, and it doesn't always get universal, unquestioning buy-in from the veterans, right? Because there's a whole set of perceived and actual challenges and shortcomings that go with relying on young players. But it really feels like from the top of the roster down, everyone gets it, and everyone knows that they're part of this process, and what they do and say and how they treat those younger or lesser known players matters.
And I think one of the other differences is, and I don't know how, maybe this is common in other teams, but I know with the Sounders, it's not like Peter Kingston got called up from Defiance and then met everybody the next day. It's like he's been training with the first team off and on for over a year. They do a lot of work to sort of integrate the two groups. And there's almost, I don't know that there's ever an instance where a player is getting a first team assignment and it's anything like the first or second time that they have interacted with the team. I mean, they have separate practices, but they're constantly bringing players up, and it's not always the best players from Defiance that are called up. It's like whatever position need they have. They've had this kid Gallatin Sandness who has been training with the first team off and on for over a year, and he's not even signed to the Defiance yet. He's an academy kid, and it's sort of like this is sort of the way they do things. And so the idea being that one day he's going to get called into the first team, and he'll just be expected to do the job. But I don't know how many people know this about Peter Kingston. This is I think going to end up being a really fascinating story if he continues to develop. But I don't know the last time a player like him has come in. Like it seems like a previous era of MLS where this is someone who came through the academy. He went to college. He transferred because he wasn't really playing as much as he wanted to be playing. And then he played in USL 2. And I believe he spent a whole year in US. Like I think there was a year that transpired between his draft year and when the Sounders actually brought him into Defiance. He's an undrafted player who just sort of like stuck around. And now it looks like he's getting a real, he looks like he's going to get an MLS contract. And we just don't see that very often where, players like that who, if you don't get drafted, it's one thing to be a 3rd round draft pick and sign with an MLS Next Pro team and just sort of stick around, but it's like another beast to just be like, yeah, no one picked him to be anything.
Mm-hmm. That's a great job of the shepherd sort of tracking the flock, right? Even when they're not under your umbrella,
right,
at a given moment. And it says something about, there's this idea of like what it means to be a Sounder, and the very word Sounder means something, right? And those of us outside of the Puget Sound area are prone to sort of rolling our eyes when we hear Sounders people talk about this, right? Like, okay, what else did the Sounders invent here? But it's true. Like there is an overarching sense of place that seems to stick with multiple, and not just players. It's something across different roles and relationships to the club and the fans and the concept. And I have to say, for example, Rothrock, I think, is sort of the most prominent current example that he chose to stay, and seems to be reaping the benefits of that. Right? It's a win-win for club and player that they convinced him to stay when many players, many professionals in his particular position or situation feel they have to leave, right? And there's so many examples of guys who don't really fully become themselves. Sebastian Berhalter maybe is a prominent one right now. He had to leave Columbus, where he signed his homegrown deal and his dad was the coach, to become his full self and his best self. And it seems like, there's a possibility for someone in with a Sounders connection to maybe do it a little differently.
Yeah, it is an interesting story. All right. Well, anyone else that's out? It's like we don't need to go through the rest of the West, but is there from 7 down to 15?
I tell you, yes, there is, because
I was gonna say, is there one or two teams that you feel like have the potential to sort of jump into that next tier?
Yeah, I'll throw out a couple names, and I want to point out too, a lot of people at sort of my level of punditry or observation of this league have been talking about the East sort of pulling away from the West in terms of overall competitiveness in recent years, and it had felt like there were more elite teams in the East. And I even have a friend who had this theory that Messi and Miami, the star vehicle being in the East, was actually going to fuel that inequality because all these Eastern Conference teams get at least one
big
Messi
paydays
per year, when you can, in the case of my team, the team down the street from me, DC United, they go up the road to Baltimore, and although it antagonized a segment of their hardcore, what's left of their hardcore fan base, they more than tripled their attendance, and probably their gate, right? To play in Baltimore, the Messi game. And so if East teams kept getting these Messi paydays and then investing it back in the club, which is not a given, then that could even exacerbate the conference inequality. It doesn't appear to be the case, because I look down the standings here, and after a really rocky start on opening weekend at Seattle, the Rapids are balling right now, and I know they played a pretty poor SKC team over the weekend, but they were pretty stylish in how they went about it. And they're all the stuff that they were kind of trying and not pulling off at Seattle, they're now pulling it off, and they're showing that they can play in transition as well. I see an identity forming there that leads me to believe that they're going to be, at the very least, a tough out in the months to come. But then the most flowers I think I would give to the remaining teams will go to FC Dallas. This is a team that year one under Eric Quill last season, they were building something. They had this sort of collective challenge, traumatic event, perhaps, in terms of the Lucho Acosta relationship imploding. They'd gone out and spent real money to bring the disaffected Lucho from over from Cincinnati. They knew it was a risk in terms of him having fallen out with past clubs. It lasted a matter of months, right? And they had to ship him out to Brazil, and then that was the sort of like the milestone or the turning point in their whole season, and they formed this really, I would say, impressive team mentality. They got all their guys bought in on being a tough team to beat, being defensively rugged and organized, and being good in transition. And now we're seeing that they had a wild one in a derby game. They came back from, they're 2-0 up. They go 3-2 down to Houston at home, and then
all in the first 35 minutes.
Yeah, incredible first half. What a first half! And then it helped that Houston had a second yellow card that changed the tenor of that game. But they were able to bring far and away their best player, Petar Musa, who is trying to get on Croatia's World Cup team and is doing all he can to get himself into that conversation. Comes off the bench, right, and instigates their equalizer and then scores their winner late. But it's not just him, right? There's a really cool attacking partnership when they have both him and Logan Farrington, former Oregon State standout, who's again a draft pick and not a hyped academy kid. Come up in Wisconsin. He was another example of talent that remains in the super draft. He is starting to become an elite striker in this league. And how many domestic, non-academy, non-youth national team players take this path that he's on? It's super, super impressive. And he had Doyle compared it to Bergkamp. He had a Bergkamp-esque touch and solo skill check to produce Dallas's first goal. And so they've got, the question is with Dallas is and will remain, do they have enough top-end talent? They could probably use one more top player. There's talk that they're still looking for a DP number 10. But at the moment, I think that's a team that anybody who plays them is going to feel it, that you're going to have to work to get points off of Dallas. And they're doing this with their home field advantage being somewhat compromised, right? As anyone who's watched a game broadcast from Toyota Stadium will know, they're in the midst of a multi-year renovation overhaul of their stadium, which I think is going to change everybody's idea of what Frisco is, right? Because it's going to be a gorgeous stadium when it's finally done. But they've only got, maybe half the stadium, half a bowl essentially that they can fill up. I think it's
for sure the TV side of the stands are closed. That's what we know.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, this is a good example of a 1.0 club that's trying to step into the next phase, because the reason that there's that it looks so poor on TV is that they put all the TV camera infrastructure on one side, just to say, which is where the press stuff was. So it was just sort of like a 1.0 kind of decision. And my favorite lore about Toyota Stadium is that Lamar Hunt, who was still alive and still involved in the ownership of that club when they were building what was initially Pizza Hut Park, the lore has it that he hated paying overtime. So that stadium got done when it got done, and they were still working on it even after FC Dallas had started playing it. And 20 odd years later, they are still working on it, to their credit. But anyway, I say all this.
Can I just the other thing that's funny about the TV side, the side that gets shown by the TV, is that it's also was traditionally the uncovered side, so that even when they were drawing
that's the west side, right? So you picture the hot Texas sun is setting in the west,
right? And
it's the section that's now closed that is on the camera that the cameras are showing. That's the east side. That for a typical 7:30 start in Texas summer, the poor fans on that side getting absolutely roasted by 100-degree sun. So there'll be awnings all the way around, and it'll be closer to, I think, a Cincinnati or Red Bull type of. Yeah,
it's just such a funny state, because it's like it was almost designed to look like shit on TV, and now they are trying to, they're trying to correct it, and it probably, it is kind of funny, but whatever. We're not going to get
Maslow's hierarchy of MLS needs, right? You have to remember they just needed a place to play.
Yeah, exactly.
where they weren't going to pay rent, right? And I know there was kind of a. As I understand it, there was a sort of an organizational soul search that went on where it was, okay, are we staying in Frisco and building this place out, or do we try to go back downtown? You do what Chicago was trying to do to get back into the urban core. And they picked Frisco. Helped that the city was ready to pony up some public money to help with the Hall of Fame project, and then I think there's public money going towards this ongoing.
And Frisco's
renovation.
also grown up. My understanding is that Frisco's sort of grown up around the stadium as well, so it's not quite in the middle of nowhere the way that it felt when it was built.
Yes, and it was. And I, as someone who's old enough to have gone to an FC Dallas game in year one, I think it was 2005, and then who's gone more recently, and it is like, and I'm from that part of the world, so I know more than most. The urban sprawl of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex has been sprawling outward from the city centers since white flight of post-World War II and the whole desegregation of the American South was happening. Like the urban sprawl started then and continues to this day, and at some point it's going to reach the Oklahoma border, and maybe it'll just keep going. But the issue you have in a place like Dallas that you don't have in Seattle or vice versa is that, is there there in the heart of downtown? Are you going to really reap a benefit by going back to the Cotton Bowl, let's say, or finding a downtown location or are you actually closer to your typical fan in Frisco now? So, I'm a city dweller myself, but I try not to overly editorialize here. I mean, they've made it home, and a big part of that club's identity is also that they need those 24 training fields or whatever that are out back, because that's where they're ostensibly getting their future stars through their academy.
Yeah, and they need to fill those extra dates with high school football.
Yeah, hey, and shout out to the grounds crew is one of the best, and I've seen them pull off some amazing stuff at Toyota, because they've got football games happening. They host the D2, like they host the D2 stuff. They usually have a bowl, and they have concerts. Like that's a pretty good grass pitch considering all the many events that they're hosting. So just shout out to those guys.
Well, I think we're so if you are listening to this, hoping to hear much about Sporting Kansas City, the Timbers, St. Louis City, Minnesota United, Austin FC, Galaxy, or Dynamo, sorry guys, but we're not going to actually spend any more time talking about the dregs of the Western Conference. So far. But we're going to do, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. I just want to talk a little CONCACAF Champions Cup with you. That sound good?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, great. All right, we'll be right back. This is No Study Yet This, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Sounder at Heart has been around in one form or another since 2009. In 2026, though, we make a pretty significant evolution when we go analog. Yes, that's right. In the year of our Lord 2026, we are publishing a real-life magazine. We're calling this thing 4, as in Sounder at Heart 4.0, but we're stylizing it as IV because we absolutely love Roman numeral. And if you want to refer to it as IV, that's cool too. The first issue has a comic book style cover that was hand-drawn by local artist Kevin Newbern. Features by Tim Foss, Susie Rance, and Charlie Boehm, a statistical deep dive by Cap Bush, a Q&A with Brian Schmetzer, a column by G. Willow Wilson, and photographs by Noah Reif, Max Aquino, Mike Russell, and Jane Dershowitz. I could not possibly be more proud of the work everyone put into making this, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you'd like to get your hands on one of these limited edition copies, we're currently selling them for $15 on our website. Get yours now. No Study Yet This, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Welcome back to Nos Audietis on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. We're here with Charlie Boehm. We just finished talking about the sort of power structure of the Western Conference, and we're going to now shift to the power structure of CONCACAF, where we are now into the quarterfinals, which I think is the business end of this tournament here. A lot of, we've gotten rid of the chaff, I think we can say. And unfortunately, that means we got rid of a lot of MLS teams, but it is all MLS and Liga MX now, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
I'll double check on that.
It's Sounders,
bracket here,
and Nashville are the only MLS teams left.
I'll run through the quarterfinal matchups. We have Toluca versus Galaxy, LAFC versus Cruz Azul, Tigres versus Sounders, and Nashville versus Club America.
So we got all four. I don't know. People were saying, we got 4 and 4 here. We got all Liga MX MLS matchups. I guess this is where we find out if, again, we get a great example of, has MLS actually made meaningful progress in closing this gap that we can't stop talking about and will never stop talking about until MLS teams are regularly winning this thing, which I think has only happened once in the modern era. Is that correct? Yes. I believe the Sounders are the only team to have won it in the modern era.
But you knew that.
I did, but I kind of alley-ooped it to myself. It's unbelievable. It is. It's unbelievable. Paul Tenorio out here saying that MLS never can compete, and he gets flooded by actuallys from Sounders fans. It's just poor Paul.
I'm sure Paul would say it's the exception that proves the rule.
That's exactly what he said. I think that was a quote from him, an actual quote from him.
I mean, what's fun about four Liga MX versus MLS matchups is we could keep the same ratio. It's mildly conceivable that more MLS teams could make it into the semis. It's extremely conceivable that we could have an all Liga MX.
Yes.
semifinal field. So a little bit of hazard built into the drama.
Let's just start here. Do you think any of the MLS teams are favorites in these matchups?
You could make a case for Nashville and LAFC, I think, but that would be a very arguable case, because I think you could say Club America have not shown themselves to be the overpowering colossus that we are maybe accustomed to for most of the last few decades. They had a hard time with a pretty poor, out of form Philly team. They do not have their usual fortress, right? Again, World Cup.
Yeah, where are they playing?
The Azteca they've kind of been nomads.
At Pumas?
Previous game, their home leg, which it turned out to be a draw, is at Ciudad de los Deportes, which is another Mexico City area team. I'd heard someone say that they're having to play, some of the Mexico City clubs are having to play out in Puebla, which is well outside of Mexico City proper. But I'm not sure. I'm gonna look and see if they've announced.
I guess Toluca could potentially host games as well, which is technically, kind of a suburb.
Let's see, so leg 1 is at Geodis Park, and actually it looks like they don't have a venue listed on FOTMob at least. So there's been a little. I mean, when you consider how big these teams are, Cruz Azul and America are legit gigantes, but they're stuck in a very awkward position because of the Azteca renovations. But
all right,
okay, so Cruz Azul is going to host LAFC second leg at Estadio Cuauhtemoc, which is in Puebla. Yeah, which is, I don't know if it's quite compares to Spokane, but it's most coaches would say that's an away day. We're gonna approach this like an away game, right? So, there's still an altitude advantage, and that maybe is the most powerful part of all. And they know, like, Club America and Cruz Azul can summon a big crowd pretty much anywhere in Mexico they play, so they'll still have significant home field advantage. But Club I just think they're a little bit off their peak.
Club America does not have a stadium listed even on the CONCACAF schedule page.
Yeah, so who knows what machinations are involved with that. But yeah, it's again, if you're looking for reasons to be hopeful, because I think when you see what Tigres did to Cincinnati the other night in Estadio Universitario, El Volcán,
Yeah,
that home field advantage is like visceral, right? It slaps you in the face the minute you walk in. It's the vibe, it's the confidence of the players, the familiarity, it's the fans, like it's the all those routines that, for example, Seattle as a club and team and the fan base have to adapt, right? And so you're just not at the same rhythm in some place like Spokane as you are at your house. So,
yeah. I mean,
I'm reaching here a little bit. I recognize I'm not saying that they're not favorites, but I think there's a little bit less of an aura around Club America right now than maybe there has been in CCC's past. I would definitely say Toluca are pronounced favorites over the Galaxy. I think that one could actually get ugly if the Galaxy don't turn up with their very best. LAFC Cruz Azul is maybe a little more balanced, but we're talking about the defending champions of this tournament. And again, anytime you're in central Mexico, the altitude is just a massive, massive factor. And all these teams, really, I mean, all 8 teams are going to have to reckon with potential fallout from the international window too, right? You just have to hope and pray as the club coach that your guys travel well, don't get overused by their national team coaches, and come back healthy and in rhythm, because that's a huge X factor in all these matchups as well.
Yeah, I mean, Cruz Azul right now, they are the number 1 ranked team in CONCACAF, and they are second in the Liga MX table. When this time last year, they were generally considered to be the best team in the Western Hemisphere, maybe the best team outside of Europe. Toluca seems to have sort of taken over that mantle. But Cruz Azul is a very good team. Tigres is an interesting one for the Sounders. And I think this is one of those ones where I feel like the Sounders having the second leg in Seattle could be significant, in part because you saw the way that, you alluded to the sort of the avalanche that happened when Cincinnati went to Tigres. And I can't help but feel like partly that was a function of being the second leg, where they knew, like, there was this energy, this urgency. They get 2 goals in the first 10 minutes, and it's just, the whole game plan gets thrown out the window, and it was sort of just all downhill sledding from there. And Cincinnati could just barely hold on. And you would like to think that same dynamic is a little less likely when the first leg is there.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this feeling. I first saw it with the Mexican national team, and listeners of a certain age may remember before the 2-0 myth really got established. There was just a narrative. There's just a way that U.S. Mexico games, competitive matches of consequence, would unfold, and you were always playing uphill, even in the U.S. sometimes, because the Mexican players, their technique was high level. They were all cutthroat, and they had this collective mentality of being able to smell blood in the water. And so things snowballed so quickly, and especially on home turf, they just always had this sense of when to go, right? And I think you see that with Tigres. I saw it in my youth, and then my adult life of watching and covering CCC has been one replication after another of this. The top Mexican teams in particular, they just know when to go, and they are able to tread water. And when they can tread water, like they might lose, but they don't get rolled up. And that was just so remarkable at the first leg. I mean, I've never seen, I can hardly remember a time when Tigres got rolled up 3-0, right? But they always knew, they've done it before. They knew that if once they got home, that they knew what a remontada would look like. And usually they don't have to do that because they can just tread water in the bad times. And you have to be so good your peak as a team, as their opponent, has to be so high, and then your valley has to be high as well. Like you can't let things snowball and give up cheap goals or find yourself behind on aggregate. I mean, and again, I think back to that Sounders run. There were so many examples of where someone, whether it was Roldan or whoever in that run, was able to staunch the bleeding at the right time, and they were rarely getting in a position where they had to rally and had to come back from an aggregate disadvantage. And that's just that collective IQ.
Yeah. And I go back, the moment I always go back to in that series in that run was, the Roldan thing was huge because it allowed them to sort of like it was feeling like that was getting away, like the series was getting away from them. They were in the
2-0 at Pumas.
2-0, right. 2-0 at Pumas. And it was sort of like, okay, we lick our wounds and we hope for the best when we go back. And then to come out of there tied 2-2 was huge. And we don't need to re-level that. But the moment of that series that really stands out to me as sort of, this is a little different than what we're used to, was going all the way back to the series against Lyon, who I know a lot of in the lore gets the Lyon series gets skipped over. But this is a team that the next season won CONCACAF. The year before, they had won the Leagues Cup. They were a very good Liga MX team. The Sounders had won the first leg 3-1, I believe. And they went to Lyon. The second leg is in Lyon. And I want to say they gave up the first goal, but then they were able to pull one back when João Paulo played in, I believe it was Freddie Montero, into the box. He gets pulled down. He gets taken out for a penalty. And they convert that penalty, and then all of a sudden, the whole nature of the series changed because they now had a cushion that they could sit on, and they had sort of at that point staunched the bleeding, and that was just sort of like the first time where it felt like this is a little different than what we're used to teams doing, and really what the Sounders I think have done remarkably in their CONCACAF history is they've avoided. Early on, they had a few of these things where, the one I always remember is they were up 2-0 on Monterrey and they ended up losing 3-2 when Humberto Suazo came in and just sort of took over the game. And it was like, oh, what this is, we don't have an answer for this. And he just took over. He came off the bench and took it over. And then there was the famous Santos Laguna game where they got steamrolled, I believe 6-1 in the second leg. And it was just sort of like this, unstoppable force. And it's ever since then they've seemed to have kind of figured out how to avoid that kind of thing from happening. And they've figured out that, and that's why I do think the second leg being in Seattle gives them a much better chance than if they were having to go to Tigres and withstand the madness that is El Volcán, which is really a underrated atmosphere, I think, in all of the Western Hemisphere. I mean, we hear about how things can be in South America and sometimes, but this is one of the great atmospheres in all of the way, maybe all of the world, really. I mean, it's amazing what Tigres' atmosphere is like.
Yeah, I haven't experienced it myself, but our friend and colleague John Arnold has been down there for games and speaks about it, and that even that Cincinnati game, it was remarkable. Kevin Denke scores, a header, a free kick, to snatch an away goal, to put
them back in position to advance. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And there was like the silence. People talk about silencing the crowd as an away team. And the silence was like almost an instant. And then they started singing even louder. And you can tell that half the stadium, or maybe 90% of the stadium, is singing the same song. And they know it. And they all know that moment is when we step it up, right? Like we play our 12th man role. Even it's more important now than it is when we're winning. And then just like in the way that helps the team, right? The way that they feed off of that was so profound. And it helps when you have, there's all these signposts that reassure a Tigres supporter that they've got this, right? You see, Gignac come off the bench, right? And even though he's 40 years old, you know what that means, right? And he's like the walking manifestation of the culture of the club that is in it to win everything, and goes to more finals than almost anyone I can think of. I don't know what the numbers are, but if we look at North American club soccer, regional and national. Like they're just always there. They don't always win, but they're always there. And so I think that's a powerful factor. And the key will then be managing that game, that first leg, and making it so that you don't have a mountain to climb at home.
Yeah. And then I guess to this, if we're looking for reasons to be optimistic about the Sounders, they do get the winner of Nashville, America in the semifinals, or the winner of the Sounders series would get the winner of Nashville and America in the semifinals. And then as far as I understand it, the host, like the whole thing really comes down to, do you get to host the final now? And the Sounders did themselves a huge favor by winning the first two. That's part of why winning that second leg was so important, is that it really puts them in a position where they can potentially host a final. They can if they can win at least one of the games in this next round, there's a decent chance they'll host, because it's cumulative. There's a decent chance they would host the next leg, because both America nor Nashville won both of their legs. Nashville actually only has 2 points going into this. So that would be a particularly.
I don't know if they count the first round, because they were, they had.
No, they only count round 16 forward.
So and this is I said this a year ago. I went down and covered the Whitecaps Cruz Azul final, and I was harshly critical, and I remain so again. And it's not just sour grapes of watching an MLS team get demolished in a one leg final. Actually, the last 2 years, right? Because this is what really kneecapped Columbus Crew's hopes of who I think had every bit as much momentum as the Sounders did at that phase of their run.
More, I would say both Vancouver and Columbus. I don't have any, I don't think it's fair to diminish what the Sounders accomplished, but I do think it's fair to point out that if that the path that both Vancouver and Columbus took was tougher, that doesn't mean the Sounders took an easy path, but I do think they had bigger teams that they had to beat along the way. But go ahead.
It is absurd. It is farcical that CONCACAF has decided that they can have their cake and eat it too. They want to have the one-legged final, the one-off event. They aspire to be in the realm of the UEFA Champions League, where you can schedule this thing outside of your normal parameters and make it a global event and make it a big TV event. And yet they're not quite brave enough and bold enough to host it at a neutral site and take on the extra risk of filling a building and creating hype in a local market and everything the way that the Super Bowl or the Champions League can do, right? So they decide to split the baby by making it the higher seed, but not even the higher seed, the team that is under their metrics gotten the better results on the way to the final. And it's just like extremely frustrating to me, just from a strictly competitive balance, because you've changed the ground rules. You've had one format for the entire tournament, and then you change your ground rules in a way that drastically favors the quote unquote higher seed. And it came down to, if I remember correctly, it was like a goal or two in terms, of how Cruz Azul got to host and not Vancouver. So it's farcical. It shouldn't be this way. It's a massive disadvantage to the away team to an extent that's not fair. But here we are again, very, very CONCACAF-y.
Yeah, very CONCACAF-y, but hopefully,
pour it in, pour it on. You got to just pour it on. Go get your.
You just got,
yeah,
exactly. And I guess it does add some juice to every leg. Like the Sounders had a lot of motivation to try to win that second leg, to not just sit on a 3-0 lead and play out a 0-0 tie. And we'll see how it works out, but it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. My understanding is that the Sounders have not announced this, but my understanding is they are going to move their April 12th home game, which is supposed to be their first league game, into September during an international window in September, which would not only mean one less game on this precious grass that is going into Lewin Field, but it would also eliminate the midweek game that they would have to play between the two legs of the Champions Cup, which would be potential advantage. I don't know if any other team that used to almost be the standard way that MLS did these things is once they got to the quarterfinals, they would sort of go out of their way. MLS has not done that, I don't believe, in the last few years. Most teams don't do that anymore because there's not that many places to move games.
That's the challenge: is where do you play it, and then are you kneecapping your future self by giving yourself another game in a crowded run-in? There was a fair amount of confusion and intrigue around this last year. So I think Columbus got some games moved, but the Whitecaps, on the one hand, they were saying publicly, and this was
right that they wanted that they liked it better.
Our data insisting that our data shows that our guys play better with short rests. They'd rather be playing games. We don't need to have the weekend off. And then on the other hand, he tells a different group of people that, or maybe it was Sorensen or someone, or maybe they've been reporting it from the local media. I can't remember, but they had someone within the organization said they had asked MLS to move the game before the final CC final last year, and were declined. So they certainly showed their legs. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered. Cruz Azul were a buzzsaw at Unam Stadium, but it was confusing, right? And I think in a perfect world, if you have to choose, you take that mileage off and you allow yourself to focus. And especially when we look at the injury history so far this season for the Sounders, they've got to be a few bodies here and there could make a real difference.
It definitely could. Well, I feel like we've done a decent job of sort of setting the stage for this next round of Champions Cup. I obviously appreciate you coming in, Charlie. If you don't know, Charlie wrote one of the real highlights of the Sounder at Heart magazine 4, which I should get the confidence to just call it 4 and assume people know what I'm talking about. But you wrote a great profile on Christian Roldan. I just wanted to say thank you. I hope people have gone out and read it. If you haven't read it, go get a copy. They're still available. You can go to Sounder at Heart. There's you'll be able to figure out from there. And I think Charlie is assuming we are going to be able to push this thing into press. I think Charlie's going to write us another column for another feature for the next issue, which fingers crossed is going to be a World Cup issue coming out in the next couple months. So Charlie's
got something good cooking. I'm optimistic. Got
good.
A lot of work yet to be done, but we hopefully are trying to cook up something fun for you guys. I really appreciated the chance that For and that you, Jeremiah, provided me to stretch out and go longer and go a little more in depth. I like to think that there was some detail in that rolled on piece that maybe a Sounders sicko would appreciate, right?
I mean, getting a quote from Zach Scott, I think hits that pretty squarely.
Indeed.
The reclusive Zach Scott.
For sure. So that's there's just nothing like a magazine in that sense. I'm really I've got one displayed over my shoulder here in the office. You can't see it if you're listening to this on audio, but I'm super proud to be involved in it. It's just so exciting that somebody has the ambition and the wherewithal to throw together a Dead Tree Soccer magazine in these troubled times. Right? It gives me hope.
Well, that's a good place to end it, I think. I appreciate you doing it. I appreciate everyone listening. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Full Pool Wines, and of course, thank you to our subscribers for making this all work and making it happen. Charlie, where can people follow you?
Yeah, mainly on spending most of my time on Blue Sky at CBOEHM at bsky.social. I'm also on Instagram. I think it's Charles Boehm, one word. But you can look me up there too. I try to throw stuff on there now and again. And still most of my work, but not all, is on MLSsoccer.com. I know we've been taking a little bit of a beating in the court of public opinion lately, but we're still putting out some good stuff there, contrary to some perceptions.
Definitely still some good content on there. There's no question about it. All right, Charlie, thank you for doing this. Well, let's get out of here. I'm Jeremiah Oshan. This is No Sadietis, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. And remember, you'll never get alone.
let's go f***ing Sounders.